Well, welcome back to the show. Joining me now is One Nation leader, Senator Pauline Hanson. Senator, thanks so much for coming on the program. What do you think of the government spending $20 million to tell us to think about driving more slowly in order to conserve fuel?
Truly, James, how ridiculous is that? $20 million, again, a waste of taxpayers' dollars if they've got nothing else to, spend the money on. I think they're just plodding along. They haven't got the answers to anything, so they're just putting this out to appease people. The sign during the war years, keep calm, that's all this is. Keep calm, that's what we're doing. No answers. And I'm really pleased with David Christopher in Queensland. He's dig baby dig, drill baby drill, and I think that's wonderful to actually do that, and that's what we need to do. Become self-reliant in our own resources and make sure that we can keep our sovereignty, our own independence, and provide for ourselves.
I was going to say, it seems a bit rich for the Albanese government to put the responsibility upon us to take a bus or drive more slowly in order to conserve fuel, while the Albanese government refuses to help the US clear the Strait of Hormuz, let alone drill for oil in our own country.
You're right, James, by all means. They've backed away from getting involved in it. We don't want anything to do with that. Yet they've allowed Australians to get in this situation, which I've been talking about since 2019, even prior to that. But I did a speech on the floor of Parliament about, drilling for our own oil, mining our own coal, and to actually provide security in refineries here in Australia, and they've destroyed all that. And don't forget, we've got to actually make sure the tyres have the right tyre pressure in it, because that will conserve fuel as well. How ridiculous have we come in this country? This is the leadership that we have, and people still are saying they're going to vote for them. People need to wake up. What sort of country do you want? Because the way we're going, becoming a third world country. And of course in Queensland, people are fortunate enough, the transport here is 50 cents a transport, so that's the Queensland government. But is that our answer to the future? Or is that everyone going out there buying EV cars? It amazes me where we're going to go with all this.
Yeah, it's an incredible state of affairs. Speaking of incredible, One Nation policies leaked to MPs across Parliament last week. You're calling it a serious breach of security, with the AFP now investigating. Do you suspect foul play here? I mean, you've asked the police to have a look at it. How concerned are you?
Very, very concerned about this, James. I've never, ever heard of it ever happening before. And let me make it quite clear, it wasn't One Nation that released our private files. It was the IT department, parliamentary IT department, that did this. These are supposed to be safe, secure files. They've opened them up and they've shared them with other political officers. That was open for about an hour. We got an email from another political officer saying, we shouldn't have these. Why have we got these? And that's how it was brought to our attention, to actually get it shut down. So a lot of these officers could basically have our files. A lot of this was draft policy making and in some areas that we were working on, so it is highly sensitive for us. And I get it. The other political parties really need some direction in good policies, and possibly they may learn something from reading our policies, but they'll never deliver it like One Nation will. So anyway, that's the way it is, but we are going to get the AFP to investigate this, and I want to find out why. Everything seems to be happening to One Nation at the moment. It's funny how these things never happened before and they're happening to One Nation now.
Just out of curiosity, who was the parliamentarian who alerted you to the fact that they had access to your files?
It was one of the staffers, actually. It was my electorate officer who brought it to my attention when I was in the office at the point when it happened. So anyway, I can't release any names because I haven't got a name to tell you. But whoever did alert us, I thank you very much for being honest and trustworthy in letting us know what was happening.
Have you had any information at all from either the Parliamentary IT Department or from Australian Federal Police with regards what they've found out about this leak?
No, not at this point in time. No, I haven't. It might take years to investigate. We know that with any of these investigations, it costs tens of millions of dollars and years of investigations. Heaven help us if any secure documents gets released and China ends up in the hands of China. Wow, it's pretty serious, James. I might be joking a little bit about this, but it is pretty serious what has happened, and I hope it's taken seriously by the AFP to fully investigate and find out why this has happened.
Senator, your party is saying that you have not removed your sex offender registry policy, despite it disappearing from One Nation's published platform after hiring convicted rapist Sean Black onto your staff. Can you talk me through that?
No, of course it still stands about sex offenders by all means, and people need to, feel safe, and pedophilia as well, that's what the people have been screaming out for, they want to know. But James, I'm really disgusted in Garth Hamilton, as a man that I really respected and in his abilities and that type of thing, but I think it was a low blow. I just want Garth to know, and of course James Patterson or anyone else there has been pushing this, and Sarah Elks of The Australian.
Today we are looking at a politically charged interview in Australia featuring One Nation leader Pauline Hanson, where a wide range of issues are raised, including government spending, energy policy, immigration, national security, media accountability, and criminal justice debates. The discussion reflects a broader pattern seen in many democracies where economic concerns and cultural identity issues become tightly interwoven in public political debate. At the center of the first part of the conversation is the claim that the government has spent around $20 million on a fuel-saving awareness campaign, encouraging Australians to drive more efficiently. In the interview, this is framed as wasteful government spending and contrasted with arguments about energy independence and domestic resource development. From a policy perspective, public awareness campaigns like these are typically justified by governments as behavioral demand-side measures aimed at reducing fuel consumption, emissions, or cost of living pressures. However, such campaigns often become politically controversial when the cost of communication strategies is weighed against their perceived practical impact. What is being highlighted here is not only disagreement over policy, but also a broader ideological divide between short-term consumer relief strategies and long-term structural energy policy, including fossil fuel development and energy sovereignty. The discussion then shifts into a wider critique of government leadership and Australia's energy security. Claims are made that Australia has become overly dependent on external factors and that domestic production of oil and coal should be prioritized. This reflects a long-running policy debate in Australia around energy independence, environmental commitments, and market reliance. In practice, Australia's energy strategy sits at the intersection of economic competitiveness, environmental regulation, and geopolitical considerations. While political rhetoric often frames this as a binary choice between self-reliance and dependency, policy analysis shows it is typically a balancing act involving multiple constraints, including international agreements, infrastructure capacity, and market demand. A key transition in the interview occurs when the topic shifts from energy policy to allegations about parliamentary security breaches involving leaked political documents. The claims presented suggest that internal systems within a parliamentary IT environment may have exposed sensitive policy material to unintended recipients. Situations involving document access errors or internal system vulnerabilities are taken seriously in any government institution, and standard procedure typically involves internal audits and, where appropriate, investigation by relevant authorities, such as federal police or cybersecurity units. However, at this stage in the discussion, many of the claims remain unverified within the interview itself and are framed as concerns pending investigation. What is important analytically here is the way uncertainty is constructed. The interview presents early impressions of a potential security issue alongside speculation about intent and broader political implications. In such cases, investigators typically distinguish between system failure, human error, and deliberate interference before drawing conclusions. Without confirmed findings, it is not possible to attribute cause or motive, and this is where the gap between political narrative and procedural investigation becomes significant. The conversation then moves into a highly sensitive area involving criminal justice policy, workplace employment decisions, and public safety concerns. Allegations are referenced regarding the employment of an individual with a serious criminal conviction history in a political environment, and concerns are raised about risk, rehabilitation, and public trust. These types of cases often generate intense public debate because they sit at the intersection of two competing principles: community safety and the rehabilitation of offenders after they have served their sentence. From a policy standpoint, Most democratic legal systems operate on the principle that individuals who have completed their sentence are legally entitled to reintegrate into society, including accessing employment opportunities, unless specific legal restrictions apply. At the same time, employers, particularly public institutions, are often expected to apply additional scrutiny when hiring individuals into sensitive environments. This creates an ongoing tension between rehabilitation and perceived risk management, which frequently becomes politicized when such cases enter public discourse. The interview also includes strong emotional framing and personal accusations, which shift the tone from policy discussion into adversarial political argument. In such moments, political communication often relies on reputational framing, questioning motives, fairness, or media bias, rather than focusing solely on verifiable facts. This is a common feature of high-intensity political interviews, especially when issues involve criminal allegations or national security concerns. Another notable element is the use of comparative international references, where other countries are cited as examples of societal change linked to immigration, culture, or policy outcomes. While comparative politics can provide useful context, it also carries analytical risks. Each country operates under different legal systems, demographic structures, and institutional frameworks, meaning direct comparisons can oversimplify complex realities. Academic research in this area generally emphasizes that while global trends exist, national outcomes are heavily shaped by local governance and policy design. The discussion also touches on constitutional and legal constraints around religion and governance, as well as the limits of state intervention in religious practice. These are grounded in broader democratic principles, such as freedom of religion and equal application of law. However, interpretations of how these principles apply in practice often vary significantly in political debate, particularly when linked to questions of national identity or social cohesion. Towards the end of the exchange, the conversation becomes more focused on accountability, media coverage, and political motivation behind public criticism. This reflects a common dynamic in modern politics, where media reporting, political opposition, and public perception interact in ways that can amplify conflict narratives. The distinction between scrutiny and perceived targeting becomes part of the political argument itself. Stepping back, what this interview illustrates is not just disagreement over individual policies or incidents, but a broader struggle over how national identity, security, governance, and economic priorities are defined and communicated. In democratic systems, these debates are expected and often necessary, but they also require careful separation between verified facts, political interpretation, and rhetorical framing. This raises an important question for audiences. When listening to politically charged discussions, how should claims be evaluated in real time? What information is confirmed? What is interpretation? And what is speculation? And how do framing and language shape the way complex policy issues are understood by the public? Ultimately, the debate reflects ongoing tensions in many societies around trust in institutions, the role of government in economic life, and how diversity, security, and governance are balanced. These are not simple issues with one-sided answers, but evolving policy challenges that require evidence-based discussion alongside public accountability. What do you think? Are these concerns being raised as legitimate policy critiques, or are they being shaped more by political framing and interpretation?